Sense of Soul.
Hey, Soul Seekers, it's Shanna. Journey with me to discover how people around the world awaken to their true sense of soul. Now go grab your coffee and open your mind, heart, and soul.
It's time to awaken.
Today on Sense of Soul, I have the honor of having back for the third time author Colm Holland. Colm spent 25 years working in sales and marketing in the publishing industry. He was a member of the Harper Collins team, which published Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist in 1993. Colm teaches the art of alchemy in everyday life, and he has devoted his life to true empowerment through inner transformation. Years ago, he came on to talk about his best-selling book, The Secret of the Alchemist. And then he came on to tell us about the true origins of Jesus, the myth behind the man, which was written by the late Geoff Roberts and edited by Colm. Today, he's joining us to tell us about his gripping psychological thriller called By Accident Most Strange, If Thoughts Could Kill. I always enjoy my conversations with Colm, and it's my honor to have him back with us again today. So please welcome Colm Holland. You never seem to surprise me, you know, from the Secret of the Alchemist to Jesus to now a thriller.
There's a connection there somewhere.
Ooh, I like that. Are you still podcasting?
No, not at the moment. I paused. I may get back to it, but I did stop because I was just too busy writing.
But yeah, your new book is book one.
Yeah, book one in three parts.
Man, that's exciting. You know what's funny is that I was sitting here wondering about you earlier. I daydream a lot about situations, and in my mind, they become characters.
Mm. Ooh, okay. That's interesting. So, because I'm a student of Carl Jung, and I've read and studied for years now, most of his work, one of the premises of his thinking, which it's easy for us after the fact to take for granted, is that he was actually trying to say to the world, the human psyche has two elements to it. And one of those I'm going to call the unconscious, he said. Now we've got to, for many of us now, that's sort of common knowledge. Well, let's put it this way. We accept that as a probable case. But at the time, the psychiatrists, his contemporaries, didn't really give much credence to that at all. There was a handful of them. And the reason why Jung and Freud got on so well together, just digressing slightly here, is because Freud was talking about the unconscious. And Freud was trying to say the unconscious is the dominant part of the psyche. We think that our daytime conscious life is completely independent of our dreams or our imaginations or anything else that's going on in the psyche or in the mind. This is it. And that, occasional bad dream and stuff, it's just low level stuff. Freud said, no, no, no. We are controlled by our unconscious. And Jung, in his studies of schizophrenics at the hospital where he worked, he came up with the same theory. So the two of them got together, and so you and I and all of us now who accept the reality of an unconscious part of the mind, we have them to thank for that, and another guy called Adler as well. The three of them really pioneered that. And modern psychiatry sort of still tips its hat to this as a concept, but it's not a controlling concept. For Carl Jung, the unconscious is what rules us. We are driven by our unconscious. And our thought life, our dream life, our daydream life, all of those things. I mean, you told me that, sometimes you start daydreaming and the people start appearing, and they take on personas. Well, Carl Jung would have loved you. And in the latter years of his life, which is quite amusing, really, he admitted that a lot of the time he was helping people, get through their complexes, which is why most of them went to see him as a psychiatrist. But what he was really doing, he admitted in his later work, was that he wanted to know what was going on in those people's unconscious minds. And how did it manifest itself? How does it make an appearance? Does it come through our thoughts? Does it come through our behaviors, repetitive behaviors? Does it come through our priorities, the things that we think are important in life? How much of that is that? Do we actually reason? Do we actually sit down and make a list and consciously choose all these things? Oh, this is how I'm going to think. Oh, these are the things I think are important. Oh, this is the person I'm going to marry or not. He said that most of that is controlled from the part of the psyche that he called the unconscious. The thing is that the persona, which is the ego, which is the conscious part of our mind, is very proud. So the ego and the persona and the various personas that we've created as adults from childhood is very proud, and it wants to take the credit for who we are. You know, I made these decisions. Oh, this is me. You know, this is all my doing. I know I'm not under any other kind of influence. And then Carl Jung said, typically what happens is sort of middle age. And he was quite strong about this. He said, up until middle age, which can be anything between 30 and 50, depending on how quick you mature, as it were, then up until that point, really what your psyche is doing is just learning. It's like artificial intelligence. It's just picking up stuff from the parents, the people who raised us, picking up stuff from our peers, from our siblings, picking up stuff from the media, picking up stuff from just the world in general, and basically sorting it out and deciding where you fit in this thing called, you know, the human race, basically. And then he said, when you get to about middle age, the unconscious typically says, okay, I think I know it enough now. I'm now going to impose my unexpressed, I'm going to manifest the unexpressed parts of my existence onto the conscious mind, who quite frankly has been ignoring me all these years. So the whole concept of repression, of pushing down trauma, of trying to push away pain and abuse that's, you know, occurred. The conscious mind has been busy, you know, managing these things, trying to deal with them and push them down. And then Jung said, quite frankly, they won't go away. They're like, you know, it's like trying to push, you know, a barrel of apples. They're always going to want to float to the surface. And the unconscious mind always wants to manifest its contents, always. And when we get to middle age, it sort of goes into what we call a rebellion mood. Enough's enough, it says. Now I'm going to make my presence felt. I mean, it has been usually quite making its presence felt over time, but I'm really going to make my presence felt. And this is called quite often, we've coined the phrase of midlife crisis. You don't hear people talking about midlife crisis as much as we did in, you know, when I was younger, but it still exists. We've now given it more biological names, you know, for women and men differently, you know, male menopause, you know, all that stuff. You know, we've sort of started to categorize it in other ways. But whether you're male or female, round about whatever middle age is for you, if you haven't been listening to your unconscious, if you haven't been trying to take notice of it, and the way you could discover if you have or you haven't is really simple. I've got a simple trick, by the way, which I recommend to everybody. The next time somebody upsets you, triggers you off, makes you angry, makes you pissed off, whatever, makes you unhappy, makes you feel this big, have a look at what that was that got triggered. What did you feel? How did it make you feel? And can you think of other occasions in the past when you've always, or, when you felt like that before, have a good sit down, once you've calmed down, once you've stopped blaming everybody else, once you've, yeah, you made me feel like this, it's all your fault. Why do you keep doing this to me? Every time you say that how much that winds me up, all of that stuff. That feeling, that anger, that frustration, whatever it is sitting on top of repressed emotion in the unconscious.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to find out. My book, my new book, which is a psychological thriller, is my attempt to actually do something quite selfish. I have to confess, this book was a really selfish project. I thought, why don't I give my unconscious free rein? Why don't I, in the privacy of, yeah, I know, in the privacy of my office, and then I'll open it to the world. But in the privacy of my own office, why don't I write a book that's coming straight out of my unconscious? Oh my goodness, I could, well, I'm sorry, I do apologize to everybody that's going to read it. But it's, oh, sneaky stuff. Wow. It's like one of my first readers who I have huge respect for, she called me halfway through reading the book for the first time, and she said, "Oh my goodness, Colm," she said, where did all this come from?" I'm going, well, I don't know, is that me really? Yeah, it must be. So what I discovered was that I have in my unconscious, there is, and I think I'm not the only one, and not many people, I'll put my hand up, I'll be prepared to admit it. There is a secret psychopath who wants his own way, who believes that a means justifies the end, or the end justifies the means, rather, or both, actually. That to employ what Carl Jung called the archetype of the trickster. If you've read any of Jung's archetypes, well, he's definitely in there. But most importantly, and this is where the connection goes with my other books, The Secret of the Alchemist and The Trials of Jesus, the understanding that Carl Jung had of the way that we personify good. So I was raised in a Christian environment. So the imagery, the mythology that I was raised in, I can't help that, just how it was. And Jesus, that's the reason for the Jesus book for me, why I needed to help produce that book, was Jesus personifies everything that's good. He's sinless according to Christian mythology, Christian theology. He's love incarnate, he's God incarnate, he's everything that's good about humanity and the divinity. So great. Carl Jung said, that's great. He said, but I've got a problem with that. And I don't always feel like that. In fact, on the contrary, I have really, sinister thoughts. And if I look around me at the world around me, at the drop of a hat, we go to war. At the drop of a hat, people commit murder. At the drop of a hat, people abuse other people. At the drop of a hat, children are treated terribly. So he really had a problem with this. So where does that come from? Now, if we're made in the image of God, according to the Christian faith, how does all this work? Where does all this other stuff come from? Is it the devil? Is it, and he said, well, I don't really buy that because I think it's in me. So what is that then? And that's when he was getting interested in alchemy. Now we're going back to The Secret of the Alchemist. So he said, what I love about alchemy is that it doesn't pretend to just personify good and love, which many of the early alchemists in the 16th, 15th and 16th centuries in Europe were committed Christians. I mean, they were, that was part of their life. Being a Christian, there was no question that was what they were. And yet they were acknowledging that another force. And so Carl Jung said, well, how did they personify this other force? Here we've got Jesus over here. Who's over here? And it wasn't the devil. It was this character called Mercurius. And it's in all the, if you Google it, if you Google Mercurius, same as in the spelling of Mercury, but IUS, Mercurius, what you discover is that he is the sort of the quicksilver of everything that isn't all love and goodness, love and light. He represents the part of the human mind and psyche and persona that is quite happy to play tricks on people, is quite happy to see somebody else's demise if it means that he's going to gain from it. And this Mercurius character, sometimes called Merlin, by the way, and Merlin is a character in my new thriller. So my main character in my book has emerged out of my own unconscious. He is called Jean-Patrick. You'll read about why he called himself Jean-Patrick. He's actually Irish. I'm of Irish ancestry, so that's a whole nother story. But Merlin appears when he's abused by this man, Jean-Patrick, is abused by his father. So there's a route to the way that Jean-Patrick is. He was terribly treated by his father, was quite brutal to him. And out of that, Jean-Patrick began to hear a voice. And the voice is Merlin. And Merlin says, let's do a deal. There's a pact. I'll enable you to be a clairvoyant because I can see dead people, he says. You can become a clairvoyant as long as you let me get my way when I want it.
Ooh, deal with the devil.
So he says yes. And the first victim is the boy's father.
Oh.
No reference to Freud's Oedipus complex at all, obviously.
Oh my gosh.
So there's the connection between The Secret of the Alchemist, the whole concept of Jung and alchemy, and Paulo Coelho's wonderful fable, the Alchemist, and then my book about Jesus, really understanding the mythology of the origins of the Christ figure, and then now this is probably my most daring book, in as much as I'm daring to go into my own unconscious, my own psyche, and examine the parts of that I maybe have suppressed. I don't know. I don't see any harm. I've never killed anybody, by the way. I've never wished anybody
And
dead
have
as
you
well.
thought of it?
Yeah, no, maybe, no.
It is funny because sometimes you might wish on somebody something bad. Like, gosh, I wish they would stub their toe. They just piss me off. And then they do. And then it doesn't make you feel good. But it is that voice, that trickster that comes up. And you're right. It's something that comes deeply from you and comes to the surface. And I like what you said about, just noticing when you're triggered or at those times. For me, I've learned to really pay attention to those times and pause immediately. And I like Tara Brach has it's called RAIN. It's like recognize, accept, investigate, and nurture. I love that. And that has helped me because
Yeah,
in that moment, there's many things that happen. I mean, you have an opportunity to react differently. I also like find it in my body. Like, where is this? And kind of sit with it. And I've discovered many things, and usually they go back to childhood.
yeah,
And you're right. They are coming out if you're not aware of them and you're living not in control.
yeah. No, we're not as in control as we'd like to think. I've got a lovely quote of Carl Jung's here, which I spotted the other day. We've got a small group and we're reading Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Carl Jung's autobiography together, which is really fascinating to do it with other people, by the way. He said that everything in the unconscious mind, seeks outward manifestation. So there's not much we can do about it. he reckons it was a default mode built into the human psyche, that the unconscious mind wants to manifest its existence, whatever we've aided and abetted the unconscious by when we repress. So when we're
Yeah.
children, I mean, it's not a choice we particularly make. It's a defense mechanism, and sometimes it saves our lives. There's nothing wrong. There's no right or wrong here. These are just facts, really. So, when I wrote The Secret of the Alchemist, and I talk about how I needed to find the root of my anger.
Mhm.
I discovered that there was a very small boy, a very angry small boy in my psyche, and so I was very fortunate to be able to personify all the pain and the hurt that caused the anger into him. And like you say, in the nurturing, it's one thing to look at the unconscious and the pain in the unconscious. It's another thing to be able to embrace it. That's a whole nother. That's the hard work. In my opinion, that's the great work of alchemy. That's the thing that the tiniest percentage of human beings ever really dare to do. But if you dare to do that, the benefits on the other side of that are unmeasurable.
Yeah.
You talk to many people who have been through, death of the ego and inner child healing. They will all tell you basically the same thing. Now I'm free. Now I can live my own life. I'm free of whatever control that I had over me. But more than that, in my case, what I discovered was that this little boy buried deep within me that I'd locked away, he actually was my greatest asset. I I thought, I'm the adult in the room. How wrong is that? I'm the adult in the room. Um, I'm the one that's going to bring salvation to the child. I'm the one that's going to redeem the child from its pain. And no, that's not what happened. What I discovered was that he was the wise one. He's the one speaking the truth. He's the
Mhm.
one who was actually the treasure in the cupboard that I needed to discover. So that he was the beginning of my hero's journey. And Carl Jung had similar. I only read. I mean, I did that work when I was in my late 20s, so many moons ago, and I only started reading Jung much later, several decades later, really. And then I discovered that he had exactly the same experience. And so his child became person number one, as he called it.
Right.
And then that became the unconscious. And so that was so that no wonder I'm such a fan of his,
Yeah.
because I'd already been there. Oh my gosh, yes, he's right. So the thing we despise the most becomes our greatest treasure.
Mm-hmm.
That's the secret of the alchemist. To do that, though, we have to discover something else in the psyche, and these two things balance each other. And that is, we also have within us, every one of us, we also have this deep root of unconditional love within every human being, no matter how despicable they are. Whether it's unlocked or not, I mean, it can be really locked away. And for many people, it's got locked away years and years ago. But there is a deep root of unconditional love. If we are prepared to unleash that and then bring that to bear on the things in our unconscious that need nurturing, where all the deepest pains do exist, then that's where the two sides, the two opposing sides of the psyche can come together. And that is the philosopher's child. That is the birth of the philosopher's stone, the philosopher's child in the alchemical terms. In Harry
Yes.
Potter as well, there's the same things.
Alchemical marriage. Right.
Yeah, the marriage, the divine marriage. Yeah, absolutely. So the divine love, deep unconditional love, as well as the mercurial painful, buried treasure. When these two can come together, then that's my mission. So writing a book, writing a thriller was a confessional. It's a sort of a confessional in a way from me to the world to say, I'm prepared to put my hand up and reveal, what I've got going on in my unconscious life. But I'm in less danger to the world if I'm prepared to admit to it.
True.
I'm only a danger to the world if I don't admit to it. It's like a pressure valve, isn't it? It's just,
Yeah.
it builds up, and then one day it's just going to go boom.
Yeah.
So when the people who work with potential serial killers, horrendous, massacres in school, these young guys who, for reasons we can't even begin to comprehend, why they commit such, atrocious massacres, then when you think about the psyche, there is that in all of us, and for some it's more dangerous than others, but we all need to take care of ourselves, because we may not do what they've done, but every now and again we're in danger of exploding, we're in danger of hitting out, we're in danger of hitting out in anger, as it were. So
And
there's
it also affects our relationships, right? Because usually what is
exactly.
happening within you is for reflection of your relationships,
Mm.
unfortunately.
We go to romantic relationships in particular, we attach ourselves to another, in the hope that they're going to give us love. Of course, to love and be loved. There is nothing. That's it. That's it. That's what life's all about, really, to love and be loved. But you notice that phrase is to love and be loved.
Mm.
So I've always been of the theory that you get as much love as you give. So that's why in my Secret of the Alchemist book, I talk a lot about self-love. If we can learn to love ourselves, then we'll find it much easier to love other people, and we will have less requirement on them to make things better for us. In my opinion, a relationship, particularly romantic relationships, whether it's heterosexual or same-sex, irrelevant really, any romantic relationship, where we're hoping that the other person is going to make up for something that's missing in us, that relationship's in danger from day one. We should come with a sign across our foreheads. I'm looking
Where?
for some. Yeah, danger. I'm looking for somebody to make up, what I can't do for myself, because they'll fail you. Of course, they'll fail you. I can't think of any. When I think of all the lovely people I've known over the years who are no longer together for various, tragically in some cases, that it was always a case of
Yeah.
unrealistic expectations.
Mm-hmm.
But falling in love is such an unpredictable thing. I mean, there's a great case of the unconscious being in charge over, one of the things I'm doing in my spare time, I laugh when I say spare time, is I'm doing this read along. I'm doing a slow read of 10 of
I
Paulo Coelho.
know.
Yeah, you've
Yeah.
seen that.
I
Yeah.
follow you. Yes, I have.
And the latest one is called 11 Minutes. According to Paulo Coelho, it's the average time to have sexual intercourse.
That sounds about right.
He based it on a book
Sometimes.
called, he got the idea from a book called 7 Minutes. And
Oh,
I'm not saying he timed himself, but he decided that was too short.
it is kind of specific, isn't it? Not 10 minutes.
He wrote a whole novel called 11 Minutes, and and we're just finishing studying it now together. And it's it's based on a true story of a woman that he met who fell into a life of prostitution, who decided that love was not something that she could ever attain to. So why bother? Why not just allow herself to fall into a life where sex just meant, a way of making money?
Mm.
And so, as I said in my opening remarks when we were studying this book, explicit sex, not something you expect from Paulo Coelho.
Makes me want to read it in some weird way.
Oh, it's very explicit. From
Oh,
a
is it?
female, yeah, not what you would expect. In fact, I've had to put most of it behind a paid wall because
Oh,
I didn't
wow.
want it out
Okay.
there. I didn't put it. I didn't want it out there with my name on it in free for anyone.
Was that his unconscious book?
Yeah, I'm not commenting on that because I think it's too
Okay.
personal. I comment about
Right.
him and, I'm his self-appointed psychoanalyst, really. Um, uh, but, without him asking for it. But I
Yeah.
can usually I can see through most of the unconscious archetypes that he's portraying in many, including The Alchemist with the hero's journey. And that was the most obvious of all of them, really. But in 11 minutes, where he's exploring this relationship between sex and love through the eyes of this woman, the happy ending is that she does find love in the end.
Mm.
So thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
Otherwise that would have been too much, I think.
That's a good thing. I thought about when you said how we all have love within us. And then I thought about, these children or people who are, committing mass murders without even blinking an eye.
Mm,
The louder of the hate, right? That shadow is so strong and
mm,
just
mm,
bearing up that
mm,
that love that we all have within us. I mean, you have to wonder like how broken they are after the fact
mm,
when, that hate seems to simmer down,
mm.
and how destroyed they must feel.
My heart goes out sincerely to everybody who's been a victim of any of those
Yeah.
situations. Just can't even begin to imagine how they feel. But
Ha! Guess what? Guess what just happened? This is a perfect unconscious situation. So when I was 17, I worked at a place here in Colorado called Chuck E. Cheese. Have you heard of it?
oh
It's
yeah, I know
like a
Chuck E. Cheese. Yeah,
pizza place. Okay. I didn't know if you had them over there.
we
And
don't. No. Oh yeah, I think we do.
oh,
There are some Chuck E. Cheeses.
good for kids. Food is bad, but so it was like one of my first jobs, and besides working for my dad, but I had a friend. I had friends that worked there from high school, and I had made a good friend in the kitchen. And I mean, he was so nice. He had a brother that worked there too. They were completely opposite. But one night he just flipped out and he came in and he shot, I think, like 5 people, killing all of them but one. And that's where that came from, that comment that I made. And I didn't think
Mm,
about him, but it's deep inside of me.
right.
Because I always felt like I knew him and he was nice and we
Mm,
had, funny relationship, joked with each other, and I
mm,
didn't know him as a mass murderer. And so that was always very confusing for me. It still is, but especially as a child, right?
yeah.
17. It was
Yeah.
confusing. He killed a
Very.
good friend of mine.
Yeah. No. Horrendous. Horrendous. And you could
Yeah.
imagine his parents and brother and
Yeah.
the guilt that they have to carry then for the rest of their lives as well for not knowing and
Yeah.
feeling so bad for the victims' families and the victim. I mean, just there. So Young was conscious of all of this. I mean, his
Mhm.
years of work with schizophrenics. I mean, he really devoted the first half of his life trying to solve that problem through therapy. And of course, what we now know is that most of that problem has to be solved through medication. There are ways of medicating to
Right.
stop that being so severe, even if it never fully goes away. I mean, he was trying to do it through therapy and talk
Right.
therapy in particular. Not really that successful. Most of his success was with so-called normal people, people who weren't in mental institutions or suffering from any kind of chronic mental illness. people, like we all like to think we are. So, I'm a normal
You're
person, but then
normal.
yeah, I'm normal. Yeah, I'm normal. You're normal, whatever that is. But yeah, he said, the psyche is so delicate. It is such uh, a unfathomable almost. I mean, he never felt that he ever really. He said, my idea of how the psyche works. He said, it's just my idea. If somebody else has got a better idea than my idea, but fine, go for it, because I don't know. I think I've got an idea. He said, this is my idea. This is my myth, he called it. This is my story. This is how I understand myself. I mean, he had a massive nervous breakdown, which lasted about 2 years. Again, not many people sort of want to talk about that part of Carl Jung. He also had 3 affairs as well while he was married as well.
Wow.
I mean, his wife almost left him many times. So, hey, here's a guy who has created this philosophy which works for lots of people. Well, I would say, it explains 80% of how I see life. Still not fully able to apply it
Right.
to his own mind and his own psyche. But when he went into that nervous breakdown, I mean, you've probably read about this, Sean.
The red book.
Yeah, the Red Book. Have you? I don't know if you've ever read the Red Book. It's worth
I've read some
Googling.
of it. It's pretty
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah. Well, like you said, I'm going to go mad for 2 years, if that's okay with everybody.
Mhm.
His salvation during that time was that out of his madness appeared a character who he ended up calling Philemon,
Mhm.
named after a character in an ancient myth, a Greek myth, actually. Oh, I think the Romans had it as well. It's one of those borrowed ones. And Philemon became his wise old man. So somewhere in here, he said, I've got a wise old man who can help me interpret this other stuff that's going on in my head.
Mhm.
And it got to the point where he'd walk around the grounds of his home having full-blown conversations with Philemon. And then he'd record them. So he said, okay, Philemon said this, Philemon said that. And for a while, he lent on that almost psychotic, experience, really. I mean, Philemon was almost a psychotic episode. Now, I'm not claiming that the characters in my book are
First, Douglas
psychotic,
Sullivan.
but we have had a few conversations. But any writer will tell you that. Anybody who writes fiction in particular.
Yeah.
As Charles Dickens, who famously said, oh, all I have to do is sit down in my office and start writing, and guess what? The Artful Dodger will appear in the corner. Mr. Bumblewick will
Wow.
appear, and sometimes he said there's just too many of them, and I tell them to be quiet. I just want to listen to you for now, and then he'd be writing
Right.
away. All writers do that, and so writing, dramatizing, having outward conversations, keeping a dream diary, even though it looks like it's complete nonsense.
Mine does.
I've just gone through a whole spell. So what? The only disturbing thing is that when I'm writing my fiction, I start dreaming so vividly. My dreams become
Mhm.
really vivid, even if they bear
Me
no
too.
relationship to our. It's like, oh, okay. It's like free reign.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my counsel to people who struggle, there might be people listening, Shana, who's sort of saying, well, yeah, this is all very interesting, but I don't, I don't have any daydreams. I don't have any. Now, how do I know if my unconscious is having a control over me in a ways that I don't, I've tried
Right.
self-awareness. I'm not going, well, start trying to be creative is
Mhm.
my recommendation. Get
Wow.
into drama, or start writing poetry, or join a writers club, or start painting. Anything. Yeah, anything that will enable you to unleash those parts of the mind that, you probably locked away somewhere down the track.
We
Yeah.
forget that we are creators as well.
Yeah, yeah. And even if we think it's nonsense, you
Right.
don't have to write, publishable novel to write. You can write anything. You can, what happened to me today, and fantasize about it, make something up, if I had if I had 10 million bucks, this is what I'd do with it, just create this whole fantasy world. Because we
Yeah.
do all that daydreaming anyway, but we don't give it credit because it doesn't seem valuable. It doesn't seem to have any intrinsic value to it. So Coelho would encourage, sometimes it encourages clients in their sessions, his therapy session, to just dance.
Oh,
He said,
I
when was the
love that.
last time you did a silly dance? And they look at him like, like, am I paying you for
Oh my
this?
gosh. I sing. I mean, and not
There you
everybody
go.
enjoys it. My kids say, "What is your life like a musical? You're always singing." It is kind of. It
I
feels that
love
way
that.
sometimes.
So what do you sing?
No, I
Karaoke
just sing.
types?
No, I mean, sometimes it's a song, but sometimes it's, I don't wanna be up right now. I wanna be in bed. You know? In the mornings, my kids hate when I sing to them in the mornings, which is why I do it.
Mm,
But what did Einstein say about imagination? That it was like one of the most important things.
mm, mm.
He said
Yeah,
that
if
as
you want
well.
to solve a problem, then you need a really good imagination.
Hmm.
Because and Carl Jung and Einstein were contemporaries, of course. They were around in the world at the same time, and they did meet. So they did
Did they?
have some. Yeah, yeah.
I didn't
They
know that.
Yeah. In fact, I think it was Einstein that introduced Jung to Wolfgang Pauli, um, the quantum physicist who was equally famous in his day with Einstein for his discoveries. I mean, Wolfgang Pauli was the guy who said our thoughts can influence an experiment,
Mm.
and he would he would uh, have his students doing experiments in the laboratory on some really complex quantum physics problems that they were trying to solve. And they would think they were beginning to get some sort of result. And so he would get his mind into a state of, this experiment is not going to work. It's a complete waste of time. And he would get himself into that state of mind. And he'd walk into the room and he would just sit there and the whole thing would collapse.
Mm.
And he said, well, I'm sorry, but I just needed to prove something to myself. He said, I'm going to go away and do this experiment 2 or 3 more times. And of course, it would work. He and Jung had a field day together. So Jung says, I'll analyze your dreams. And Pauli says, well, I'll help you see if I can prove any connection between the human psyche and events in the real world. And it was because, Pauli said, well, I've got concrete examples. I could influence an experiment just from my thoughts. Scientifically, of course, it can't be proven, and lots of people have had a go. There are even people in my book, The Secret of the Alchemist, I should talk about one uh, English professor, um, a probability, a professor of facts and probability, and he advises the government on probability solutions to problems. And he started to collect people's examples of synchronicity. He should have talked to me. I could have filled a book. Should have talked to you,
Me too. Yeah. I love it.
It's normal life for us. You and I we've just adopted it as part of life. I'm not surprised when something I'm thinking about, something that, over here, something happens and it's exactly what I needed to know. I mean, I just go, okay, thanks. Thank you, whatever, and carry on now. But I can remember the early days of, when that all started happening for me. But
Magic.
so Jung and Pauli sort of came to the conclusion that there is a mysterious link. It's just one of those mysteries of life that for the individual who has something happen simultaneously or synchronicity at the same moment that they're thinking about, they get a phone call from somebody and say, oh, wow, you won't believe it. I was only just thinking about you like half an hour ago, and that stuff. He said that the event only has meaning and purpose for the individual concerned.
True.
That even when you start telling people, I've tried it,
Yeah.
I can bore you at a dinner party, no
Right.
problem.
Yes, because I think it's fascinating, right? And everyone else is like, oh.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I don't know. And that's because it's important to you because it
Right.
happened to you. And so it's quite a treasure then in that sense, if you think about it. I mean, we like to
Yes.
think we can prove everything, that there's a scientific answer to everything, and that if you could just prove this, then that kind of validates it. He was saying it doesn't need validating by science.
That's right, because it's your experience.
Yeah, it's you. It's you're the validator.
Yeah.
You kind of make it happen because you're open to it. The universe, which I hate to personify the universe, but for the sake of just using that language, the universe somehow is
Supports
connected to
you.
that, and it provides whatever your psyche needs at that particular moment as some sort of reinforcement or validation for what it is you're thinking. Should I do this or shouldn't I
Right.
do that?
But Colm, it seems unconscious though.
Oh yeah,
It is unconscious.
yeah. I mean, that's why Jung loved it. It was one of his, in the end, if you had a list of his proofs of an unconscious mind, that was one of them.
Yeah.
In fact, it probably went to the top. It was something that he worked out much later in life, but it validated for him the existence of an unconscious presence in the psyche that has, for the want of a better word, magical or mysterious powers to manifest stuff.
But manifesting though is more conscious, is it not?
Let me go back to that quote that I quoted a while back from Jung, so
Okay.
where he
Yeah.
said everything in the unconscious wants. So if we keep going with that sentence, he then
Mm.
says that the personality or the ego also desires to evolve, to grow up, to get out of its unconscious conditions and to experience itself as a whole. In other words, both sides of the psyche, the unconscious part of the psyche and the conscious part of the psyche, both have the same default desire to become whole.
Wow. That's
So
amazing.
I don't believe that you can manifest purely consciously. I don't. I think when you think you're doing it consciously, all you're really doing is you're unconsciously inviting the unconscious to get involved.
Make a magic spell.
No,
No.
no, no. Harry Potter, yeah,
I
I
mean,
love it. Wouldn't it
we'd
be
all be
great?
doing it all day.
Yeah, yeah. Great, let's do it.
Bibbity bobbity boo.
Win the lottery tonight. Yeah, where we just write down the numbers. Yeah, the life doesn't work like that. What I also challenge in my novel, my thriller, is our relationship to money.
Ooh.
There are two main characters in the book, which is in three parts. So there's three stories involving the same two primary characters, the protagonists. The female protagonist is a failed actress. Well, she didn't even give it much of a try, actually. It lasted 5 seconds. And that, oh no, dear, no, it's just, oh God, no wonder. I've just worked out where that's come from. When I was 13 years, oh, talking to Charlie, this is, you should charge me for this. When I was 13, I was really into drama and I was invited to join a theatre company, a major major theatre company, professional theatre company, as a boy actor, and because of and my teachers and my parents, and it got turned down because everybody said, well, you can't make a living out of being an actor. You know, you'll just be poor for the rest of your life. And they said, oh, you've definitely got an academic career. You should focus on that. So now I've got this character who happens to be female, who has a 5-minute go at being an actress and fails. Oh my goodness, that's where that came from. Oh, there you go. I'll have to blog that.
Another example, Brett.
Yeah,
Wow.
there you go. Straight out of my unconscious, repressed. Okay, so her other issue is that she wants quick money. And when she bumps into Jean-Patrick on a ferry to Mallorca in the Mediterranean to go and work in an art gallery, who is a friend of her aunt's, what she discovers is that he has managed to manipulate his way into the life of a millionairess. And when she comes along, the millionairess is really old. She's an octogenarian, so she hasn't got long to live, really. So where's all this money going to go? She figures that out. In a split second, she's got it sorted. Like, this guy's sitting on a gold mine, and he's about to let it just fall through his fingers. How can I get involved and salvage the money for my benefit? And so that's really the first plot in my. So these two, Carmen, her name is, no offense to any Carmens out there. So Carmen and JP, who we call him, they form a sort of an unconscious pact. The question I have about them, and I haven't really decided yet, is whether they really know that they're committing fraud, or they've deluded themselves into not seeing it as anything wrong. Anyway, they're successful at it. I won't spoil the story.
This sounds really fascinating. So you're still obviously connecting things as you just did with yourself, but also still even trying to like analyze the situation, the characters. I mean, it seems like this is like a living story, almost like The Alchemist.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the fun of fiction, is that you can read something 10 times. I mean, I'm a huge fan, by the way, of a British author, which you may in the States you may or may not have heard of, called Dame Hilary Mantel. Dame Hilary Mantel wrote a historical series of books, which PBS broadcast in the States, called Wolf Hall. It's a historical series. Wolf Hall is the home of Jane Seymour.
Oh, Wolf Hall. Yes,
Yeah,
that's
Wolf
right.
Hall. Yeah, Jane Seymour's home, and it was an inspired choice of title. So she follows Henry VIII's chief advisor, a guy called Thomas Cromwell, who changed England. I won't bore you with English history right now, but you can Google it and find out in a couple of paragraphs how he changed England. But the way she wrote it, and I just held a weekend in honor of Hillary in my spare time. We had a.
God, you have so much time on your hands.
Yeah, we had quite a few of our brothers and sisters from the United States there as well, which was lovely, because she's got a lot of fans in the States. Yeah, we had a whole weekend of speakers, and it was fabulous. Academics, because she was quite an academic writer. She was as much a historian as she was a fiction. But one of the things we all said about her, this is the reason I'm going to this, is that she said the dead are not really dead, and the people of our past that we've known, who have now moved on, are still with us because of us. And she had this incredible ability to connect with the spirits, really, of these historical characters. I mean, everybody who's into her style of writing says, oh my goodness, Thomas Cromwell was, as I'm reading the book, I feel like he's standing next to me. That's the power of her ability. So she would create these characters in a way that they were totally believable. The motivations that she gave them, the reasons they did what they did, the reason Henry VIII, did what he did, and even the beheading of Anne Boleyn and all of that. As you're reading it, you just think, yeah, well, of course. The rationale behind all of that doesn't seem out of place because she manages to do the content. If you're into history,
I would love that.
yeah, the first 3 books, 2,000 pages. Be prepared to commit a year of your life.
Really?
Yeah, so that was quite transformational for me in the way I thought about fictional characters. So even though my characters are fictional, doesn't mean they're not real. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yeah, it does. So even in the way how you just had discovered your younger self within the story, I mean,
Yeah. Thanks, Shona.
that's pretty amazing.
I know it's quite funny, really.
Well, Colin, I just adore you. I can't wait to have you back on for the other 2 books because I want to read them all. Your wisdom is it's just amazing, and the way I receive it is something I can actually understand. You speak very well. Sometimes I read some of Carl Jung's stuff and I have to read the same sentence like 4 times. But you have a way of really connecting, kind of like in the Gnostic Gospels, they say all the time, for those who have ears, let them hear.
Mm,
And,
mm,
you
mm,
know,
mm.
I'm definitely hearing you and receiving it. So thank you so much. Everybody
Thank
can
you,
go to your
Shona.
website.
colmholland.com. Yeah, and the book, if you just type Colm Holland into Amazon, my books all come up there now. So yeah, that's the best way to find. And I'm
Yeah.
actually writing book 2, so busy,
Yeah.
always.
Can't believe you wrote a whole book and working on your second since I talked to you last. It's amazing. I need to get on it.
Going to ask
You
you,
know,
how's that going? You ready to come on? You need to get that out there.
I know.
Keep me posted, won't you?
I will. Of
And
course I will.
we'll tell the world on your behalf.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you,
All
Shana.
right. Take care.
Love and blessings. Thank you.
Sense of Soul.